Welcome in to a special trade deadline edition of the PHNX Coyotes Podcast. I'm Leah here with Petey and Craig. We got Jacob behind the Mac today. The Arizona Coyotes close out the 2024 NHL trade deadline with 3 trades, and that's it. Potentially one of the most anticlimactic trade deadlines for the Coyotes I can remember in quite some time. How are you guys doing, and how are you feeling, most importantly?
Tired, but I mean, maybe a little surprised by Dumba, but not by the rest, to be honest. I mean, was hinting in my primer that, Jason Zucker wouldn't draw anything more than a mid-round pick, and then, without retaining, and that was with the idea of retaining salary, right? They didn't retain salary. And then Matt Dumba, I mean, look, you want me to just get right into this, the crux of this whole thing?
Well, let's just start off by introducing this, which is, we're going to go ahead and say this is the Desert Financial Credit Union transaction of the day. Desert Financial Credit Union, Arizona's #1 credit union, named by Forbes. And let's just do a quick recap of the trades before we get into it. So, Jacob, we can go in any order. Throw up the first trade. Troy Stecher, this was the trade that went down yesterday. The Coyotes received a 2027 4th-round pick in exchange for Troy Stecher and a 2027 7th-round pick to the Edmonton Oilers. Next, we got the Jason Zucker trade. The Coyotes received a 2024 6th-round pick. The Predators received Jason Zucker. And last but not least, Matt Dumba. The Coyotes received a 2027 5th-round pick, and the Lightning received Matt Dumba and a 2025 2025 7th-round pick. So there you go. Those are the trades. And now, Craig.
Yeah, I think people look at that and they're like, wait a minute, why is Troy Stecher worth more than Matt Dumba or Jason Zucker? Well, it's the money. It was the money, the salaries, right? Jason Zucker was on a $5.3 million deal. You prorate that, it's still a hefty sum for teams to take in that are cap strapped. Jason Zucker was a $3.9 million. Matt Dumba was a $3.9 million deal. So compare that with Stecher, who was on a 1.1 prorated. It's a little easier for teams to absorb, so they're more amenable to that. Now, listen, had the Coyotes been able to retain salary on these guys, they probably could have had higher draft picks. They could have had higher draft picks. I can say that. But I guess the plus side of all this is they're rid of these two guys, right? There's nothing left on the books for either one of these guys. And if you look at Matt Dumba's contract in particular, he has a bonus coming due, $1.35 million bonus coming due after the deadline. So they basically got Matt Dumba for $2 million on this trial. They're saving like $3.2 million by getting rid of these guys. Is the return disappointing? Sure it is. Like when they signed these guys this offseason, it was such a positive moment for the franchise right after the Tempe vote failed. Bill was trying to turn this whole narrative around, prove that players wanted to come here. The hope was that these guys would both bring them more assets at like the deadline. But let's be blunt here. Neither Jason Zucker or Matt Dumba played well for the Coyotes, so they hurt their value. Couple that with a buyer's market and the inability to retain salary, and you get what we got.
Good afternoon, everybody. Unlike everybody else here, I'm well rested. It's not being a reporter. I had a great night's sleep. I took a 2-hour nap in the middle of the afternoon, woke up, texted Leah. I'm ready to go. One of the things I wanted to bring about with Jason Zucker and his 6th round, was it 6th round, Craig? Am I right in that? Was that a 6th round pick? The last time. Do you know why? When the last time a 6th round pick that the Coyotes picked played in the National Hockey League? 2007. Ooh. That's a long time since they had a 6th round pick that played a game, and it was Scott Darlin. played games as a 6th round pick. Now they had some successful 7th round, but we'll get to that later. But the 6th round, they haven't picked a player in the 6th round that played a NHL game since 2007. That's 16 years ago. So the reality is this isn't about an asset unless it's an asset you pair with something else and trade for something else down the road. But clearly this isn't about that. This is about cash savings, and it's about what Craig and I talked about yesterday. It's either this or nothing, and end up with a player that you're not only going to have to spend the extra money for, that you don't really need the wins, and you literally send him packing in 2 months. So what good is it? So a 6th round pick now that you can bundle and put together with something else, or maybe you trust in GMBA and go, okay, maybe he hits one, even if it's honestly, this won't sound terrible, even if it's a good American League player, isn't that a win for this franchise? So yeah, I know it's right? Not a lot going on, but these players, this is what you get. This is what you get. Matt Dumba, one of his worst years of his career. He's -13, his worst plus minus of his entire career. He's sitting at one of his lowest point totals in his entire career. Zucker was hurt at an inopportune time and never really caught on offensively like you had hoped. So when we sat here in August going, gosh, these are guys that are going to flip for 2nd round picks, it just didn't turn out that way.
Yeah.
Well, let's remind everybody the draft picks that the Coyotes have coming up. And we'll start with the next 2 years, this year included, 2024, 2025. This is an updated look at the upcoming draft picks. Of course, the Arizona Coyotes have to put it lightly, a shit ton of picks. So 42 picks across the next 4 drafts, 13 picks in 24, 10 picks in 25. This one, they added the 6th round pick. It was actually an original Dallas pick. That's why the Dallas logo is there. And then I can't even believe we're talking about 26 and 27, but let's take a look at 26 and 27. The Coyotes have 10 picks in 2026 and 9 picks in 2027. So for the first time, we're seeing more than just the standard 7 picks in 2027. I think 2026, we've already talked about a little bit, but crazy to see those extra picks in 27.
Jacob, can I have you do me a favor? Can you throw up the 24, 25 picks again? Because I just want to give people some insight on what it looks like for other teams. So in 2024, 25, what do we say, Leah, in the first 3 rounds? Was it 10?
It's more than 10. 13 and 24, 10
and 20. To give you an
20.
idea, for 24 and 25, you know how many picks the Florida Panthers have in the first 3 rounds of the next 2 drafts? The Coyotes have 13. Florida, 2. 2. Vegas, 4. Carolina, 5. So you give up your future. Colorado, you know how many Colorado has in the first 3 rounds of the next 2 years? 1 in the first 3 rounds of the next 2 years. Coyotes have 13. So again, I know it's frustrating, and I know you look at this, well, what can they do? They have more draft picks than those 4 teams combined over the next 2 years, and not in the 5th, 6th, 7th round that the players might play. This is the first 3 rounds. That's where the players come from. They dominate in the draft over the next 2 years. It's incredible when you start looking at those stats of those teams that you're looking to win now, how much of the future they sacrifice to do that. So we joke about the 26 and 27 drafts, like, oh, that's funny because it's so far in the future. These teams didn't plan for that. And now their dues is coming. And I got to say that there are very few teams that are set up in the future like the Arizona Coyotes for draft picks.
Yeah, and that's the term that you always hear around the hockey operations department: building sustainable success. And I'm not saying 4th and 6th round picks in 2027 are the way you do it, but it's not like they're going to stop trying to acquire draft picks. Again, Bill's a scout by trade. He's got a really good scouting staff. He believes in them. They're going to continue to try to acquire those assets, because even when they come out of this, when they hope to get better, they still want a pipeline of prospects coming in. You want to replenish it. You just play the numbers game as much as anything else, because the draft is such a crapshoot. You just don't know what percentage or which of these guys is going to pan out. So the numbers give you a better chance at success.
The other thing is the Coyotes are not going to draft all 42 picks, because what this gives the Coyotes, and especially down the road, as you mentioned, like maybe this year and even next year, they draft a lot of those picks. But stockpiling in 26 and 27, what that allows you to do is when you're more competitive in those years, you actually have draft picks you can spend. Because I think one of the things that we saw in this particular trade market was that teams like Colorado, teams like Boston, Edmonton, they didn't really have any draft capital at all to spend. And the Coyotes are thinking ahead, and it's not just about, 42 draft picks. It's actually like, okay, now these are picks that we can package and send when the Coyotes eventually become buyers in the market. So it's not just about drafting these players, it's about adding capital to your cabinet as well.
Yeah. Listen, I don't want to I know a lot of people in the Discord and Coyotes Nation are bummed today, and I get it. Yeah. This is a disappointing day at the trade deadline. You did not expect when we went, when we came out of last summer, they did not expect that we were going to be looking at something like this on trade deadline. But again, part of that's on the players. The players didn't perform. This wasn't Shane Gostisbehere performing. This wasn't even, previous Nick Bjugstad. These guys didn't play well. So when your guys aren't playing well and there's already a question about, is this veteran maybe on the decline or is this veteran done? Well, they just furthered that narrative. And then, again, couple it with the inability to retain salary, the unwillingness to retain salary, you're not going to get a high return.
And you saw that in a lot of the deals over the last 24 hours is how many teams retain salary. And I know we're not getting around the league, but you look at the Hurdle deal, doesn't happen unless San Jose retains $8 million of salary over the next 6 seasons. Deal doesn't happen, period. And so I think that the Coyotes, and especially Bill Armstrong, is kind of handcuffed. I mean, you can't. I'm sure he could have, if he could have retained salary on both of those players, he might have been able to acquire a higher draft pick. Period.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's been a lot of people, poking fun at the 2027 picks because it's so far in the future. We actually got a sneak peek at some of the top prospects from the 2027 draft class. So let's go ahead and take a look. They're children.
They're children. There they are. The next Coyotes draft class, there they are. They're just at the Little Howler program learning to skate at this point as we speak in 2027. I tell you what, Leah, so I did some homework on the 2027 draft, and I'm not kidding. There are a couple players to keep your eyes on. Ready? Jackson with an X. Jacobson, he's got 106 points in 35 games for the Brandon Wheat Kings under 15 team. He is projected number 1 right now, and the top American is Rocco Pelosi, playing for Mount St. Charles. He's got 139 points in 53 games. When you're 15 or 14 or 12 or whatever the hell these kids are, man, these kids are lighting up 4, 5, 6 points games. So there you go. Jackson, Jacobson, and Rocco Pelosi.
Jackson with an
them. Why are we ranking them?
Buddy, I'm ranking them right now. There you go.
Jackson with an X is an ultimate hockey name.
No, Jackson with an X is an ultimate you were born in 2009 name. 2009?
Yeah, 2009.
Yeah. The 2009 birth year.
Yep, and Tim got it too. Rob Brothel, that kid right now, he's got
Tim, how do you know that?
32 games for the Winnipeg Thrashers. Kid out of Winnipeg, Prab. And it said, you know what's sad is people knew that. Tim knew that.
Tim, I mean.
He's on the list. He's on the top 12.
All these names you're going to bring up will have Y's at the end, like Joey and Mikey and
Craig, what are you and I going to be doing for the 2027 draft?
No, you know what's scary? Like, if the Coyotes don't actually get their shit together here in the next few years and the rebuild, I don't want to be talking about the top prospects anymore. I want to be talking about the best available players at the deadline for the Coyotes to buy.
They just traded Prab Batal and on their way to the cup. As they make they're all in.
Nicholas said, that is gross. My knees just popped.
They're all in on the trade deadline. Prab Batal, you are now a San Jose Shark.
I'm disgusted. Oh my God, that's insane. Well, Craig is going to have more later today. Craig, you had the chance to chat with Bill Armstrong this afternoon. We'll have video from Bill Armstrong's press conference later this evening. And without giving too much away, can you give us a sense of what's going to be in that story?
Yeah, I think I just talked about some of it. There's a competing emotions, right? You're a little disappointed. I'm sure they're a little disappointed that they weren't able to get better, but we talked about all the reasons. I guess the other thing that I'll get into, but maybe you want to lead into this when we talk about the AHL. There's some impact on the AHL as well, and that's another thing to look forward to. They made some moves to bolster the AHL team, Tucson Roadrunners, for the playoffs, and there's probably going to be some call-ups a little later this season. You only get 4 call-ups after the trade deadline, in addition to emergency recalls, which are unlimited. But there's only 4 recalls, so they got to manage that right. But we can talk about Tucson now if you want to. That's one of the sides that I think is a little more positive.
Yeah, let's talk about Tucson. Today was not just the trade deadline, it was also the deadline to assign players to the AHL and paper moves that would allow them to qualify to participate in the AHL playoffs. We saw the Coyotes did that with Dylan Guenther and Michael Kesselring pretty much as we expected. Notably, they did not do that with Logan Cooley.
Yeah, and I asked Bill about that, and I'm not going to give away everything in my story, but from my standpoint, and I think you guys agree with this as well, it's just kind of a little disappointing that Logan Cooley's not going to be down there. I don't see the downside in Logan Cooley playing AHL playoff games. I think it'd be a big upside for him actually to gain that experience. And more than that, and I don't think it was ever discussed, so I wouldn't blame anyone in this situation. I think Logan Cooley going down to the AHL playoffs would have sent a really nice message to the fan base. Like, hey, look how committed I am. I'm going to go play in the A and going to compete for a Calder Cup. I think that would have been a cool move. I wish somebody had thought of it because I think it's a really good idea and it would really help his game.
Yeah, and the other thing I wonder, Craig, and you'll get more of a sense of this, is, was it anything to do with agent, the player, or is this just strictly on the management group? So I think we'll stay tuned.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in the story. But the other side of this is, of course, the recalls. I know people have been itching to see certain players, and I think you will. Again, they're going to have to manage their recalls because you have to keep some, unless it's an emergency situation. You don't want to burn them all, right? But I think we're going to see Josh Doan make his debut later this season. So in the final month plus of this season, I think Josh Doan will probably get up here. And the other guy that I think is probably going to get a look is Aku Ratu. I think I said that right too.
Yeah,
sure.
Sure. It's funny because I did put all of those. I looked at the whiteboard, the mythical whiteboard sitting behind me, and I pulled up all of those names, and they were just trying to slot guys in different spots. And it's funny how guys move up and down on that list. Like Jan Yannick is a guy that we talked about a lot in the previous years. It just hasn't come up a lot this year. And do we see Soderstrom again for his last gasp as a Coyote? Kolya Chonak is a guy, if he's completely healthy, is he ready to get games in? But the one that the two that are most excited for me to actually see, because I've seen all those guys play in the National Hockey League, is Josh Doan and Aku Ratu. Like, I want to see those two players play. Josh Doan, a player that we've said at every level can play. He's not going to be a good college player. He's not going to be a good American League player. And he just busts through barriers, and he's a player. Can't wait to see what he can do in the National Hockey League. And I tell you what, a smart enough player can survive. Let's see what he's like on the big stage. But temper it, because I still think he's got a lot to prove in the American League before he becomes an everyday NHL player.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I also want to just flip over to the other side of this with the guys that will go down at playoff time. A lot of people are like, oh, how come they don't just call up a bunch of guys now and just, give them a look? Well, the NHL club cares about the AHL club too. The AHL club is a big part of development, and Tucson's having a good season. Mm-hmm. They've struggled a little bit recently, and they're fighting. They want home ice in that first round at least. You don't want to just decimate their roster and decimate what they've built down there, because that development and that confidence and everything that comes from having success down there matters when they make their way up to the NHL roster. So that's part of the reason you're seeing what's happening here. And then to send Kesselring and Guenther down for the playoffs, I mean, Steve Potvin is going to be thrilled, because Dylan Guenther was leading that team in scoring when he left. And Tucson's had a little bit of a tough time scoring goals, so they're going to get him back. They're going to get Kess back on the back line to bolster what I think is already a pretty good blue line down in Tucson. Could be a fun run for Tucson. They're going to be loaded up. Obviously, Logan Cooley won't be there, but they'll be loaded up otherwise for the playoffs.
And one of the Craig, when you bring that up too, is one of the advantages that the Coyotes have is they have the ability to send those players down, meaning that there are some teams that the Roadrunners are competing against that the parent club will not be sending players down because they're competing for a playoff spot, and they won't be sending those guys down either. They're going to make the playoffs or they're fighting for it. So that actually gives Tucson a little slight advantage over some of the teams that they're competing against. And Ontario Reign is one of them. You're not going to see guys from the Kings coming down because they're competing. So it's interesting to see how far this team can go. In Bakersfield Condors, there's another team. They're not going to to get anybody from Edmonton. I mean, it's an advantage for this team. And again, it's these guys get to play meaningful games. I don't see the downside of guys playing meaningful games. And guess who's going to get a lot of minutes? Kesselring and Gunther. In every situation. And then like Gunther's getting situational play now. And so is Kesselring for that matter. And can you imagine them down there and the confidence they're going to have down there? It's only going to help them in development. And can you imagine the swagger they're going to come in with then 4 months from now when we get to training camp, because they've got that confidence in their game. I think it's outstanding. And I can't wait to travel down the I-10 and get a chance to look at those guys playing for the Roadrunners in the playoffs.
Yeah. And when you teams at the top of the Pacific Division, Coachella Valley and Calgary are probably going to get bolstered as well. So it's going to be an interesting playoff in the Pacific.
And by the way, speaking of Dylan Gunther, Craig and I had the chance to catch up with him at yesterday's morning skate and ask Andre Tourigny a little bit about him. So expect to see a video on Gunther and his development coming sometime this weekend on the PHNX Sports YouTube channel as well. And as Craig mentioned, that article will be coming later today at gophnx.com. And while you're there, make sure you become a diehard, phnx.com/diehard. Get access to our Discord, 20% off merch, 20% off events, diehard only content as well. So many great perks to becoming a diehard. Make sure you do that today. A couple other implications of the day. The salary cap. That's always interesting. We already talked about the ownership's unwillingness to retain salary, but this tweet from our friends over at Puckpedia kind of explains the Coyotes' financial situation. After recent trades, Yotes have a $5.7 million projected cap space. Their projected cap hit for the year is $78 million, while they have $61 million left in actual annual compensation for this year. Craig, can you translate what that means for those who don't study capology?
Yeah, the cap hit's the one that matters. You have to be cap compliant, right? So you have to be over that. But there are obviously ways to manipulate that with whether it's retained salary, dead money from contracts like Shea Weber's. They have Oliver Ekman-Larsson still on the books. But the number, and I know Petey discussed this recently when we're talking about the Coyotes' struggles, $61 million in outlaid cash, right? That's what they're spending on salaries. And some of that is for those retained salaries. So it's not even necessarily for the players on the ice. The cap limit or the cap floor is just a little over 61 million. So that tells you what sort of challenge this roster faces. They're not spending the money. And listen, we talked about this when they started the rebuild. It doesn't make sense to spend a ton of money on a roster that's trying to lose anyway, a roster that's not going to be a playoff team. I get all that. But it doesn't change the fact that when you look at this roster, you're like, oof, how are these guys expected to compete? How is this roster expected to compete? I don't know how they did what they did the first half of this season when you look at this roster. But here they are, water finds its mark eventually, and the Coyotes have found their mark.
Craig, what do we say about their defense making on their cap hit? Did we have
$6 million of active players? This does not include Shea Weber's contract or Oliver Ekman-Larsson's buyout. $6,586,666.
Can I just give you? I want to put some comparisons out there, just again, so people understand what that equates to for teams that are challenging for a Stanley Cup right now. The Vegas Golden Knights, $24 million on the back end. The Florida Panthers, just over $21 million on the back end. Carolina, $30 million cap hit on the back end, and then the Colorado Avalanche are at $27 million on that. So when you compare, that is not comparing apples to apples. It just period flat out isn't. Those teams are competing for a Stanley Cup, and they're paying 4 and 5 times more on the back end in defense. And I've always said here in Clamor that defending wins championships. Those teams are teams that I pick I picked those for a reason. I think those 4 teams have the best chance right now today to win the Cup. Now, when the playoffs start, that may not be it, but that's where the playing field is for the Arizona Coyotes right now. Their cap is 4 times less than what these other teams are spending on defense alone. Not talking about goaltenders or forwards. We're getting to Nathan McKinnon and those Connor McDavid and those kind of guys. This is just the back end. So when you watch the Coyotes play over the last 19 games, keep that in mind when you're talking about how this team is going to compete over the next 19 games.
Nicholas said their full D group is only 6.5 mil. No wonder we suck in the D zone. Wow.
Like 6.5 million is what? Like that's like for one second pair defenseman. Like maybe your number 3 defenseman. That's what you pay. That's what they're paying for their entire blue line.
Cale Makar has 9, and you with Cale Makar, that means Cale Makar has to play all 6 positions for all 20 minutes. I mean, he's good, but
I feel like he could do it.
Yeah, he might.
If anyone can do it, it's Cale.
it could be all hail Cale.
Oh man, but Petey, since you have the whiteboard behind you, what are we looking at for this roster in the final 19?
Let's see if Jacob can make this so it makes me bigger on the screen, and then I will talk through it.
Yeah, we'll make you bigger. Just give us a sec.
It's truly. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it. Jacob's got a lot of pressure.
Screen for a second, Jacob. Go ahead.
There you go. Oh, he's muted. Hold on one sec. All right, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny when you look at the roster right now for the forwards and defense, and I'm creepily looking around the edge of the board. This is like the roster is very similar to what they've been playing with. And the honesty is with Zucker been out of the lineup with his suspension, the forwards really don't change much. The problem right now is they don't have an extra one. They're playing with 12 forwards. So it's a matter of who they call up, because the lines we saw with Keller and Schmaltz and Hayton reunited, and Kerfoot done with the kids with Gunther and Cooley, and the Bjugstad line's been intact the whole season, and McBain with Carcone and O'Brien. And that's your top 4 lines. And that's a top 4 forward group that they've gone with several times this season. And on the back end, really, I mean, even with Dumba out of the lineup, you look at that top 6, Brown is the only one that comes in as a guy that hasn't been in the lineup, on a consistent basis. And then you look at Koch as the 7th right now, and the goaltending stays the same. So when you look at what the Coyotes are playing with on the ice for the next 19 games, really, it's not going to be affected as much as possibly we were thinking. We were thinking some other of these names might have come off this list, and they didn't. So having said that, these guys have all played with each other. It's not a big surprise. The line matchups aren't going to be any different. So maybe, just maybe, they get a couple of wins in this final 19.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I'm going to get into in this story is the deals that they didn't make, right? And in this market in particular, when you're looking at guys like Bjugstad and Kerfoot and even Michael Carcone, there was interest. They were getting calls on those guys. But in this market, with this situation, they didn't want to move on from them, and they like what those guys bring. If you take those guys out of the lineup, and they've all been effective players in their own right in certain ways. Carcone obviously went into a goal-scoring drought, but then you're just filling more holes. You're plugging more holes. And you've already got that third line center filled. You've got Alex Kerfoot who can bounce all around. You got Michael Carcone giving you secondary scoring. In this market, it just didn't make sense to move on from those guys.
Yeah, and I think you're right. When you talk about Kerfoot, I think there was a lot of people kicking tires on Kerfoot because I think there's a lot of teams that he would fit up and down their lineup, and everybody wants a player that can do the things Kerfoot can do and at the pace he can do them at. But you're right, and you saw that what the market would bear today, what the buyers were willing to pay. And I don't know if you part with Alex Kerfoot right now. You got him for another year. You've got him in your stable. He's a good veteran player that provides guidance and experience for the youth of this team. And guess what? Next season, you got to field a team of 20 players. So why not include Alex Kerfoot in that and Nick Bjugstad? Because we talked about the step that this team took from last year to this year. And I know at the end of the day, their points will be similar, but they're in a playoff spot until January. And part of the reason they were there is because of what Bjugstad and Kerfoot were able to provide. So if you want to improve again next season and take another step forward, I think those two players can help provide not just on the ice, but most importantly off the ice on what they can do with their leadership. Because we talk a lot about the leadership of this group, and I think it's imperative that they have some kind of veteran guidance that helps pull this group through this. And I think Bjugstad and Kerfoot are perfect examples of what they need to have in that room.
Absolutely. There's one more transaction addition that we have not talked about, and that is the Bjugstad family. Nick and Jackie Bjugstad welcomed a baby girl, Celia Michelle Bjugstad. Welcome to the Coyotes family, and congrats to the Bjugstad family on the birth of their baby. So really exciting news. And as Craig said, Nick Bjugstad, game time decision, Craig?
Sounds
TV?
like it.
Yeah. So
and by the way, I've texted Nick already. I've suggested Stevie as a nickname. I don't know. It kind of goes. No.
I bet you're back, huh?
I did not hear back.
Oh man.
Yeah, the other thing to keep an eye on, other than Connor Ingram starting in goal tonight, is Travis Dermott has a little bit of an injury issue. I'm not sure whether he'd be ready to go or not. If he's not in the lineup, you might see a recall from Tucson.
There you go. Well, the guys in Tucson, they better get they're like fill up their tanks at Circle K with some gas, because there's going to be some drives being made here in the coming weeks for sure. Just 19 games to go on the season. Any final thoughts on today's trade deadline? The moves that were made, the moves that weren't made, anything else? I know we have a game tonight, so we'll talk again a little bit later today.
Jesus Christ. Really? There's games on trade deadline day? Who set that up?
Terrible.
Is that a thing? Gary. And Gary's in Arizona tonight, so he should fix that. Like
fake news.
Sorry.
Yeah. I love to the box and talk to him tonight.
Yeah, he's not here. But having said that, my final summation of this is you can say what you want about all the different factors that created what this return was for the players. And Craig summed it up into three things. It's not just the market, the buyer's market, definitely today. Two, the players didn't perform to their expectation. This wasn't the players that we've seen over the last 2-3. This isn't Jacob Chychrun. It's not Shane Gostisbehere that's doing those kind of things. I think that had a lot to do with it, and I think the ability to retain salary. And Craig said those things, and I think that is the biggest takeaway from today's show is remember that those three things what led to this draft, lack of draft picks coming out of this year's trade deadline for the Coyotes. Now they have to look forward for the next 19 games and then get ready for the draft.
Yep. One last thing that I would add to that is it doesn't affect the plan. It doesn't impact the long-term plan. And that's why you bring guys in on one-year deals, right? They move forward now. Yeah, they didn't get what they wanted today, but they move forward.
Yep.
And let's just remember 42 draft picks over the next 4 drafts. We can leave everybody with that parting thought. Absolutely unbelievable. All right. Well, that's it from us today for now. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button on this video before you head out. Subscribe to the PHNX Sports YouTube channel because we'll be back tonight for our post-game show after the Coyotes take on the Detroit Red Wings at home. Will we see the Mullet Magician tonight? I don't know. He's MIA. Maybe the Mullet Magician's in Vegas helping them out with their cap situation because there needs to be a little magic there. Anywho, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts as well. Follow us on Twitter at Craig S. Morgan, at S. Peters Hockey, at Leah Merrill, at Jacob_Franklin4, and follow the show on Twitter at PHNX_Coyotes. Again, keep your eye on GoPHNX.com for Craig's article later, and keep your eye on our Twitter and YouTube for quotes from GM Bill Armstrong later this evening. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we will see you all tonight after the game.
We all silly like the mayor.